Well, hey there, church. Hey, just continuing our question and response series. It's part of our series looking at the 7 letters to the churches in Revelation. And today, the question I want to respond to came in late last week, and it's the context for the question is this dynamic that we've observed throughout these letters, that the churches that Jesus is writing to, they live in a very secular culture. They're living in the first century Roman Empire, which is a very ungodly culture. And yet when Jesus is writing to these churches, he's not writing to them about the culture outside of their church or how they should be, critiquing their culture. Jesus is actually critiquing the church for the way that they're carrying his image within their secular culture. We've talked about this language. Have they just become mirrors of the culture outside, or are they actually reflecting and refracting God's image into the culture? And so with that in mind, the question that was submitted this week basically acknowledges that dynamic and then said, okay, so when is it appropriate as Christians for us to engage or to speak into the culture outside of the church? And if there's an appropriate time for that, what are the godly practices for that type of engagement? Which is like a really good question. And I'll say this, I don't know that there is really a formula for that. I'd say first and foremost, we do have to know that I think biblically speaking, the very first thing we're called to do is to hold ourselves before Jesus and to be obedient about whatever he's speaking to us about our own Christ-likeness. And I think about, Jesus' Sermon on the Mount, where he warned people to not be hypocrites. He warned his followers to not be hypocrites, which was, the Greek word it's play actors, is what he says. He says, but don't be those who try to take the speck out of somebody else's eye while ignoring the log in your own. And at the heart of that is saying, hey, deal with your own, stuff first, and then you'll be able to appropriately speak into somebody else's. I think that's true for somebody either inside the church or outside. So I think first of all, we have to be, actually pretty self-aware and honest about our own Christ-likeness. And then a couple of rules of engagement. I love that the way that question was framed. When I think about that, I think about 1 Peter. And there's 2 parts in 1 Peter that I think are relevant as far as kind of the parameters, the rules of engagement. So 1 Peter 4, Peter's writing to the church, and he says, above all else, maintain constant love for one another, for love covers a multitude of sin. Show hospitality to one another without grumbling, and as each of you has received a gift, use it to serve one another. As good stewards of God's manifold grace, his varied grace, whoever speaks must do so as one speaking the very words of God, and whoever serves must do so with the strength that God supplies, in order that in everything God may be glorified through Jesus Christ. And I think that ending paragraph of 1 Peter 4 is so helpful for just thinking about how do we engage in the world, and that urgency that we be rooted in love, not reacting out of frustration or fear, but truly being anchored in love and recognizing that when we're speaking, or in our case, in a first century or 21st century environment, typing, that we recognize as followers of Jesus, we're reflecting God's image, and are we glorifying him in the way that we speak? I love that statement that love covers a multitude of sin. There's a lot there just to meditate on and chew on. And then just a little bit later in chapter 5, he gives instructions for a couple different groups of people within the church, kind of different age demographics. And then he speaks to everybody, and he says this, clothe yourselves, all of you, with humility toward one another. For God opposes the proud, but gives grace to the humble. And I would just say, along with love from from 1 Peter 4, I think humility goes a long way in actually stewarding our voice in a way that is true to Jesus' image and that reflects him faithfully. So I don't think we all have the same sphere of influence. I don't think we all have the same calling or gifting or passion. And so I think we each need to discern before the Lord who's he calling us to engage? How's he calling us to engage? I think those two things as frameworks are good rules of engagement, love and humility. And here's what that will help us with. One last thing, and this isn't from Scripture. This is, I think I first heard this as a leadership maxim from Andy Stanley. I've heard it from other places too, but it went something like this. Oftentimes, as Christians, we settle for making a point when what we really want to do is make a difference. And if we can pause and think about that, do I want to make a point or do I want to make a difference? I think in almost every case, we want to make a difference. But if that's true, that's going to change the way we engage. Because if we truly want to make a difference, love and humility will go a long way towards us actually hearing one another, not only being heard, but also hearing other people, getting curious about why somebody might think differently about something than we do. So humility will go a long way, love will go a long way, and I think in the long run, those are some rules of engagement that will help us make the invisible God visible.